Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're the place that sorts through all the sources, the research, the stories, and tries to give you the core understanding of the people and moments that really shaped things.
And today we're diving into someone truly unique, Robin Williams. It's a story that's just dizzying.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful, yes, but ultimately deeply tragic.
Yeah, tragic is the word. Because there's this massive gulf, isn't there, between the Robin Williams, everyone knew this, like human whirlwind of improv and characters.
Right, the absolute genius. I mean, the awards alone tell you something. Oscar, Emmys, Golden Globes, Grammys, the works, a giant.
But then the sources, the later accounts, they show this other side. A quiet man, complex, even shy sometimes, and fighting this hidden neurological war that nobody really understood at the time.
Exactly. It's that contrast we really need to unpack, the sheer velocity of it.
Okay, so that's our mission today. We're going to try and synthesize that whole picture from his kind of surprising quiet start to how that signature manic comedy style even came about, neurologically speaking. Then through the films, the sheer range of them, his charity work, which was huge.
Yeah.
And then, the really tough part. The complex, heartbreaking medical details, the Lewy body disease, that define his final years. We want you, the listener, to come away with a really full, nuanced picture of this American icon.
Okay, so where do we start? To get the genius, you almost have to go back to these foundations that are, well, they're not what you'd picture for a groundbreaking comic.
Totally. That image of the, struggling, starving artist doesn't fit at all. His early life was actually steeped in significant wealth. Privilege, really.
Right. Born in Chicago, 1951. His dad, Robert Fitzgerald Williams, was a top exec at Ford, like really high up Lincoln Mercury division.
Wow.
And his mom, Laurie McLaurin, she was a former model.
Yeah.
So picture this kid growing up partly in this enormous 40-room farmhouse on 20 acres, Bloomfield Hills, Michigan.
40 rooms. That's a world away from the kind of chaotic, desperate characters he often played later, isn't it?
Absolutely. And the kid himself, contradictory. He described himself as quiet, shy even. Said he got bullied sometimes for being overweight.
It's almost impossible to square that shy kid with the force of nature he became on stage.
Right. But he said his mom was a key influence early on. She had this sharp, quirky humor. He often told this story. It wasn't about just being funny for laughs. He was trying to make her laugh, trying to get her attention, using humor almost like a tool, to connect.
Ah, okay. So it was a strategy, almost.
Yeah. And her humor was apparently fast, witty, a bit off kilter. So maybe that kind of trained his brain early on to look for the weird connections, the unexpected turns in conversation.
But despite being shy, he did well in school.
Yeah. Academically strong. Went to a private school, Detroit Country Day, was class president, even wrestled. It wasn't until high school drama, apparently, that he started to break out of that shell.
Right, and that mixed the smarts, the discipline, but also this kind of bottled-up energy. It led to some pretty funny signals when he graduated, didn't it?
Oh, yeah. His classmates in Tiburon, California voted him both most likely not to succeed and funniest.
That's brilliant. Talk about a split prediction, almost prophetic, really.
Totally. The serious smart kid versus the uncontrollable performer, it was all there.
He tried political science first, right? Briefly.
Yeah, Claremont Men's College didn't stick, dropped out pretty quick, and, well, that decision pointed him straight towards the stage.
And that led him to the College of Marin for theater. And this is where people started noticing something different, really different.
There's this great anecdote rehearsing for Oliver, the musical. He improvises something, and his drama professor apparently just stops, calls his wife, and says, basically, this kid is going to be something special. It's all the raw talent right there.
Wow. But raw talent needs shaping, right? Which brings us to Juilliard.
Exactly. 1973, full scholarship. Only 20 students accepted that year. And crucially, he and Christopher Reeve were the only two accepted into the advanced program run by the legendary John Houseman.
Ah, Christopher Reeve. Their friendship was really important, wasn't it?
Foundational. Williams's son, Zach, called them brothers from another mother. But it's Reeve's description of Williams at Juilliard that gives us maybe the first hint of that neurological energy we'll talk about later.
What did he say?
He famously described Williams as, like, quote, an untied balloon that had been inflated and immediately released.
Oh.
Yeah. Reeve said, I'd never seen so much energy contained in one person. That's not just being enthusiastic, right? That sounds like a brain firing on all cylinders at a different speed.
And that speed, that energy, it apparently baffled the pros there.
Completely. His dialect teacher, Edith Skinner, supposedly bewildered by how he could just instantly snap into all these different complex accents. And his main acting teacher, Michael Kahn, apparently thought his improv was just stand-up, not serious acting. He kind of pushed back against it sometimes.
Was there tension there between his natural style and the classical Juilliard training?
Oh, absolutely. Juilliard was about discipline, control. Williams was, well, he was that untied balloon, hard to contain.
Did he ever try to fit the mold?
He did. He managed to impress some people with a serious role in Night of the Iguana, proved he could do the straight acting thing, but the accounts suggest it was almost physically difficult for him, like holding back a tide.
And then he left Juilliard early, but not because he failed out.
No, quite the opposite. He left in '76, junior year, because John Houseman himself apparently suggested it. Said the school literally had nothing more to teach him.
That's incredible. A place like Juilliard basically saying, your talent is too big for our structure.
Yeah, it's a huge statement. And that untamed talent needed an outlet, which it found immediately in the San Francisco comedy scene.
Right, 1976, he starts doing stand-up at the Holy City Zoo. And this wasn't just any scene, was it? It was exploding.
It was the heart of the comedy renaissance, as they called it in the late 70s. This was the perfect incubator for his style. High energy, improvisational, anything goes.
But that scene also had its dark side, which he dove into as well.
Yeah, unfortunately. He was very open about it later. Said he found drugs and happiness there. Also said he saw the best brains of my time turn to mud.
That chaotic energy on stage, it was mirrored in his life off stage back then.
And when he took that act to L.A., he apparently terrified the competition.
Oh, yeah. David Letterman tells the story about seeing Williams at the Comedy Store for the first time. Letterman was already kind of established, right? And he watches Williams and just thinks, holy crap, there goes my chance in show business. Called him like a hurricane hitting the seam.
Oh, wow. A hurricane that blew right onto TV, that Happy Days gig.
Yeah, 1978. Gary Marshall needed someone fast for this one-off alien character, last-minute thing. And the audition story. It's perfect Robin Williams.
The sitting on his head thing.
Exactly. Marshall asks him to sit down, and Williams just plops down on his head. That sheer unexpected absurdity, that commitment, landed him Mork.
Which then spun off incredibly fast into Mork and Mindy. Ran from 78 to 82. And what's key here is, it was one of the first, maybe the first big network show that was deliberately built around the improviser, not just the script.
Yeah, the sources are clear on that. They wrote it knowing he'd go off script. They basically built gaps for his extreme improvisations. They knew trying to script him tightly was pointless.
So they leaned into it, and the result, astronomical. At its height, 60 million people watched that show every week.
60 million?
Yeah, made him an instant superstar. Cover of Time magazine by March '79. It's a huge cultural marker, right? Signaled this wasn't just a TV fad. He was a phenomenon.
And that TV fame obviously opened the door to movies, and his film career just defied categorization, didn't it? He moved so easily between comedy and really serious drama.
He really did. Even early on, roles like The World, according to Garp in '82, showed that depth. But it was the late '80s where he really hit his stride critically in film. And you see the connection there between the comic speed and the dramatic weight.
Morning, Vietnam, 1987. That feels like a turning point. First Oscar nomination.
Absolutely. Playing Adrian Cronauer. And the director, Barry Levinson, he got it. He knew the gold wasn't just in the screenplay. He was in Robin's head.
So he let him improvise the radio bits.
Pretty much. Gave him incredible freedom. For a big studio movie, that was almost unheard of. And Williams just unloaded dozens of voices, impressions. Walter Cronkite, Gomer Pyle, Elvis, Nixon, Mr. Ed just pouring out.
The producer, Mark Johnson, said they just had to let the cameras roll because Williams came up with something new every single take. Think about the mental energy that takes. Not just performing, but creating multiple finished routines on the spot.
That output in Good Morning Vietnam, it's the perfect illustration of what people later called his synaptic comedy style. That rapid-fire connection, characters, accents, jokes, non-sequiturs. It's like watching someone's brain make associations at lightning speed.
Yeah, that synaptic idea seems key, especially thinking about what we learn later neurologically, that ability to just switch tracks instantly. Exhilarating to watch, but you got to imagine demanding on the internal wiring.
Totally. And then came the roles that just captured the public imagination. Roles that defined him almost as a teacher figure.
Dead Poet Society, 1989. John Keating. Oh, Captain! My captain. That performance inspired so many people. That final scene, unforgettable.
Yeah. And then The Fisher King in '91. Another Oscar nomination. playing this deeply troubled homeless man wrestling with trauma, showed his willingness to go to those really vulnerable, broken places.
But the Oscar finally came for Good Will Hunting, 1997, Best Supporting Actor.
Playing Sean Maguire, the therapist. And what's amazing about that role, the sources say it resonated so deeply, even actual therapists were profoundly affected by his performance.
That says so much, doesn't it? That he could tap into that level of emotional honesty. It wasn't just acting. It felt like genuine empathy pouring out.
He projected that seriousness just as powerfully as the manic comedy. And speaking of projection,
Yeah.
we absolutely have to talk about his voice work. The Genie in Aladdin, 1992.
Oh man, the genie, that changed everything for animated movies, didn't it? Suddenly, big stars doing voices became a huge draw.
Totally paved the way. And the role was written for him. But the backstory there is fascinating. The negotiations.
Right, he had a condition, didn't he, about merchandising.
Yeah, he agreed to do it, but apparently on the strict condition that Disney wouldn't use his voice or the Genie character to sell merchandise. He saw his voice work as, like, artistic input, not something to slap on a lunchbox.
And Disney eventually went back on that.
They did, which led to this big public falling out. Williams refused to do the first sequel, The Return of Jafar. It apparently took a personal apology from the new studio chairman, Joe Roth, to mend fences later.
Wow. But the work itself? The amount of improvisation?
Astounding.
Yeah.
The animators ended up with something like 30 hours of recorded tape from him, just riffing.
40 hours. That's insane.
Totally unheard of for animation back then.
Yeah.
Dozens of impressions. Ed Sullivan, Jack Nicholson, De Niro, Groucho Marx, Schwarzenegger, just constantly invented. It was a pure, high-speed Robin Williams, just channeled through the microphone.
It shows that same synaptic brain at work, just in a different medium. But even with all that raw, kind of explosive talent, he was serious about the craft of acting, too, wasn't he? He learned from others.
Oh, absolutely. He wasn't just relying on instinct. The sources mention he actively sought out wisdom from the greats, like Robert De Niro.
What did he learn from De Niro?
The power of silence. Economy of dialogue. Which, for someone like Williams, whose instinct was to fill every space, that's a really important lesson.
Yeah, learning how to stop the current, how to let the quiet moments land. That's crucial dramatic technique.
Exactly. It's the counterweight to the natural overflow. And then from Dustin Hoffman, who he worked with on Hook, he learned about deep preparation, how Hoffman would transform himself through meticulous work before filming even started.
So blending that intense preparation with his own improvisational genius, that's what gave him that incredible range. From Mork to Sean Maguire. It's why people started calling him a national treasure.
Definitely. But alongside that incredible professional life, there was this whole other world going on internally. The passions, the giving back, but also the really intense personal struggles.
Let's talk about the philanthropy first. Comic Relief USA. That wasn't just a celebrity photo op.
Not at all. Co-founded in '86 with Whoopi Goldberg and Billy Crystal. This is a serious long-term commitment.
And it raised a staggering amount of money, right?
By 2014, yeah, something like $80 million, specifically for helping the homeless in America. And Bob Zmuda, who created Comic Relief, he offered some insight into Williams's motivation.
What did he say?
Basically, that because Robin came from that wealthy background we talked about, he felt genuinely blessed and felt a real drive, almost an obligation, to help people who weren't so fortunate. It was a direct response to his own privilege.
That makes sense. And his giving wasn't just limited to big telethons, the USO tours.
Oh, yeah. He was a fixture on the USO circuit for years. Performed for something like 90,000 troops across 13 countries, including dangerous places like Iraq and Afghanistan.
That takes real dedication, putting yourself in those environments repeatedly.
The USO thanked him profusely after his death. Said he always went above and beyond, performing in tough conditions just to bring some laughter, some normalcy to the troops overseas. Real commitment.
And then in his private life, he had these passions that seemed almost like anchors. Cycling, for one.
Huge cycling fan, avid. Would travel to the Tour de France, things like that, collected bikes.
And he was pretty open about why it was so important to him, wasn't he, in relation to addiction?
Yeah, very candid. He explicitly called it a substitute for drugs. Said cycling essentially saved his life, the physical intensity, the focus required. It seemed to channel that same high-energy need in a healthier way.
Replacing one kind of rush with another, maybe?
Perhaps. And that passion had a legacy, too. After he passed, his kids donated, I think it was 87 of his bikes, to benefit charities like the Challenge Athletes Foundation and the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation.
That's wonderful. And he was also kind of charmingly a big gamer and anime fan.
Yeah. famously named his daughter Zelda after the princess from The Legend of Zelda. Apparently, it was a shared love between them. And he was into anime too, mentioned liking stuff like Appleseed, Ghost in the Shell.
It adds another layer, doesn't it? This very modern kind of geeky side to him.
Totally. But these interests, the philanthropy, the incredible career, it all existed alongside these recurring severe struggles with substance abuse.
Yeah. The cocaine addiction in the late 70s, early 80s, that was a really rough period by his own admission.
It came to a head in 1982, didn't it? With two huge events happening almost simultaneously.
Right. First, John Belushi's death, which was shocking for everyone, but Williams had actually been with him, partied with him, the night before he died.
That must have been terrifyingly close to home. And then right around the same time.
His first son, Zach, was born.
Exactly. And Williams himself called that combination, Belushi's death and becoming a father, a massive wake-up call, like on a huge level. The tragedy provided the shock, and fatherhood provided the reason to change.
And he quit drugs and alcohol then, for a long time.
Yeah, quit completely for many years. It seemed like a real turning point, forcing him toward stability.
But sadly, it wasn't permanent. He relapsed later.
Yeah, started drinking again around 2003. He was filming The Big White up in Alaska, feeling isolated. That led to him checking into rehab in 2006.
He made a distinction, though, didn't he? Said he didn't go back to cocaine.
Right. He maintained that. Said cocaine made him feel paranoid and impotent.
Yeah.
It seems alcohol was the substance he returned to. Maybe something more familiar, less intensely chaotic than the cocaine he associated with that earlier, wilder time.
But the battle continued. He was in treatment again shortly before he died in 2014.
Yeah, admitted himself to a center for alcoholism, confirmed he was still actively fighting it right up near the end. It shows how persistent those struggles were.
Which brings us inevitably to the final chapter and the health issues that became so central and so misunderstood.
Right. Even before the most acute symptoms hit, there was maybe a shift in his work in the early 2000s. He took on these darker roles.
Yeah, like the Killers or Stalkers and Insomnia, 1 hour photo, the final cut. Much bleaker stuff.
Makes you wonder, looking back, was he exploring something new artistically? Or was it maybe reflecting some kind of internal turmoil that was starting to surface? Hard to say.
His physical health definitely took some hits. The heart surgery in 2009 was major.
Yeah, aortic valve replacement, mitral valve repair, fixing an irregular heartbeat. That's serious stuff.
And then things really started to decline. Before he died in August 2014, his publicist confirmed he was dealing with severe depression, and his wife, Susan Schneider, later revealed the Parkinson's diagnosis.
Right, early-stage Parkinson's, which he'd kept private. But that diagnosis, it turned out, wasn't the full story, not even close.
No. The autopsy revealed something else, something devastating. Diffuse Lewy body disease, LBD.
And that misdiagnosis, or incomplete diagnosis, is absolutely critical to understanding what happened to him.
Okay, explain Lewy body disease, or LBD. How is it different from Parkinson's?
So both involve Lewy bodies, which are these abnormal clumps of protein in the brain. But in typical Parkinson's, they're often more concentrated in the areas controlling movement, hence the tremors, the stiffness.
Right.
In Williams's case, the autopsy found it was diffuse, meaning those Lewy bodies were spread throughout his brain. Not just in motor areas, but crucially, in areas controlling cognition, emotion, sleep, perception.
So it was attacking his whole brain, essentially.
Pretty much. The damage was widespread. Medical experts who looked at his brain pathology said it was one of the most severe cases of LBD they'd ever seen. The sheer density of Lewy bodies was overwhelming.
And the symptoms his wife described, they started escalating dramatically in late 2013.
Yeah, around October 2013, she detailed this sudden, terrifying spike in symptoms. Intense fear, crippling anxiety, chronic insomnia, memory problems, and really significantly, paranoia and delusions. Hallucinations, too.
That sounds like a nightmare, especially the paranoia and delusions for someone whose mind was his instrument.
Exactly. And the most heartbreaking part, Susan Schneider wrote very movingly about this. Robin was aware it was happening. He knew he was losing his mind.
Oh, God.
She said he kept saying things like, "I just want to reboot my brain." He could feel his cognitive functions breaking down, this brilliant mind fragmenting, and he was powerless to stop it. That existential terror, unimaginable.
He knew the machine was breaking, that the very thing that defined him was betraying him.
Yeah. Schneider called the disease the terrorist inside my husband's brain. And she stressed this point, which is so important. This wasn't just mental illness. The depression, the anxiety, the paranoia, these weren't psychological issues in the traditional sense. They were symptoms of a physical brain disease.
Right, caused by the Lewy bodies disrupting his brain chemistry and function.
Precisely. No amount of talk therapy or willpower could fix the underlying physical deterioration. And that understanding, it completely reframes his death.
His death was ruled a suicide. But understanding the LBD changes the context entirely.
It does. It suggests it wasn't a suicide driven by, say, clinical depression alone, but rather the final tragic outcome of an unbearable, rapidly progressing neurological disease that was destroying his reality. The suffering must have been immense.
So when we look back at his legacy, it's impossible to separate the incredible highs from this devastating final act, is it?
I think they're intertwined. His comedic style itself, that synaptic quality we talked about,
Yeah, the lightning-fast connections.
wasn't just speed, it was the breadth of association. Jumping between characters, accents, ideas, emotions instantly. That's the sign of a brain wired differently, maybe more chaotically even. It's what allowed him to improvise 30 hours for the genie, right?
Right. And it's why other comedians found him impossible to imitate. Judd Apatow said something great about that.
Yeah, Apatow basically said you can't point to any modern comic and say, that's the heir to Robin Williams, because you just can't be a Robin Williams ripoff. His talent was too unique, too neurologically specific.
He also broke ground by being so open, didn't he? Bringing personal stuff like addiction, depression into his routines, made them feel incredibly honest, observant, as some called it.
Yeah, he used comedy as a release valve.
Yeah.
Said it was cheaper than therapy, a way to let out all that pent-up energy and emotion in a somewhat controlled way.
But there was maybe a fear there, too, of losing that ability.
Seems like it. There's a 1992 Playboy interview where he talks about his biggest fear being that he'd become a rock, unable to fire off or talk about things. The pressure to constantly be that volcano of creativity must have been immense.
Yeah, unimaginable pressure. And when he died, the outpouring of grief was just global, immediate.
It really was. From President Obama talking about how he touched every element of the human spirit.
Listing all those iconic roles, an airman, a doctor, a genie, a nanny.
Right. To the lights dimming on Broadway, the cast of Aladdin leading the audience singing Friend Like Me, just spontaneous outpourings everywhere.
And the fan memorials. The bench in Boston from Good Will Hunting covered in flowers. The house for Mrs. Doubtfire in San Francisco. People just needed to connect with those physical places tied to him.
Yeah. And there have been lasting tributes, too. They named the tunnel north of the Golden Gate Bridge after him, the Robin Williams Tunnel.
And Robin Williams Meadow in Golden Gate Park, so his name is physically part of the landscape he loved.
But even now, years later, his legacy is still complex, still being negotiated almost.
You mean like the recent thing with his daughter Zelda and the AI?
Exactly. Zelda Williams had to publicly ask people to stop sending her AI-generated videos trying to replicate her father's voice and image. Said it was disturbing and not something he would have wanted.
Wow. That highlights this ongoing desire people have for him, for that voice, even after he's gone, and the ethical tangles of technology trying to recreate something so unique.
It really does. It shows how deeply embedded he still is in the culture.
So, wrapping this all up, what's the big takeaway for you, the listener, from this deep dive? Robin Williams' career was just this explosion of versatility, energy, genius, but his final years were defined by this devastating vulnerability.
And crucially, that vulnerability stemmed from a physical condition, Lewy body disease, that was attacking the very brain structure that produced the genius. It wasn't a failure of will or spirit.
Right. The key lesson has to be that distinction between mental illness, which we often think of as treatable with therapy or meds, and a physical degenerative brain disease like LBD. His depression, his anxiety, his paranoia, they were symptoms of the LBD destroying his brain.
Exactly. The Lewy bodies were the root cause. It explains why nothing seemed to fix the problems in those final months. The physical foundation was crumbling.
Which leaves us with a really challenging final thought, doesn't it? Building on everything we've covered, that incredible manic synaptic brilliance, the very thing that made his comedy so unique. It came from a brain that was, neurologically speaking, operating at an extreme, maybe even chaotic level. And the devastating irony of the LBD is that the source of those gifts, that intense neural activity, seems to have also been the site of his ultimate suffering. It makes you ask, can we really separate the genius from the struggle in an artist like Robin Williams? Or are they perhaps inextricably linked in the very wiring of their brains? Something to think about.